Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalaka Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Translation: Fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. When the living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. This bewildering, fearful condition is effected by the potency for illusion called Maya. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master whom he should accept as his worshipable deity and as his very life and soul. Purport. According to Srila Sridhara Swami, the objection may be raised that since fear is caused by ignorance, it can be dispelled by knowledge and there is no need to worship the Supreme Lord. The living entity falsely identifies with his material body, family, society, and so on, and he simply has to give up this false identification. Then what will Maya be able to do? In reply to this argument, Srila Sridhara Swami has quoted the following verse from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text 14. Daivi hi esha gunamai mama maya duratyaya mameva ye prapadyante mayang etang tarantite. This divine energy of mind consisting of the three modes of material nature is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Unquote. The living entity, called Jiva Tattva, is one of the potencies of the Supreme Lord, but the constitutional position of the living entity is tatastha, or marginal. Being minute, every living entity is eternally dependent upon the Supreme Living Entity, Krishna. This is confirmed in the Vedic literature as follows. Nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo vidadhati kaman. Among all the eternally conscious beings, there is one supreme eternal living being who is supplying the needs of all the innumerable others. From Katha Upanishad. Krishnadas Kaviraj has stated, Ekale Ishvara Krishna Ar Sabhritya. Wait a minute, I got lost here. Yeah, Krishna is the only independent controller. All other living entities depend upon him. Just as the finger is part and parcel of the body and therefore must always be engaged in bodily service, we as parts and parcels of Krishna, Mamai Vangsho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha, have the eternal duty, Sanatan Dharma, of engaging in the unalloyed service of the Lord. The potency of the Lord that enlightens us in the Lord's service is called Chit Shakti. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments that when the living entity develops a spirit of independence, he is forced to come to the material world, where he enters into various types of petty and undesirable behavior that create a fearful situation for him. The Bahiranga Shakti, the illusory potency of the Supreme Lord, covers all trace of the Chit Shakti and imposes one material body after another upon the living entity for his gross sinful enjoyment. As further punishment, the living entity who has given up his loving relationship with Krishna loses all power to perceive the eternal blissful form of the Supreme Lord, who is his actual shelter. Instead, the living entity becomes attached to many temporary phantasmagorial forms, such as his personal body, the bodies of his family members and friends, his nation, his city with his buildings and cars, and innumerable types of ephemeral material scenery. Wait a minute. In such a state of gross ignorance, the idea of returning to one's original identity no longer even crosses the mind. By the laws of God, the three modes of material nature are constantly in conflict, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita. This conflict is described in many places in the Bhagavatam as guna vyatikaram. When a living entity is bewildered by the interactions of the modes of material nature, he comes to the conclusion of relativity and assumes that God and worship of God are simply byproducts of the relative contradictory interaction of nature's modes. In the name of anthropological, sociological, or psychological perspective, the living entity falls deeper and deeper into the darkness of material ignorance, dedicating himself to mundane piety, economic development, sense gratification, or speculation, in which he regards the Absolute as lacking variety and personality, which he assumes to be the product of the interaction of nature's modes. The illusory potency of the Supreme Lord is duratyaya. It is impossible to escape without the direct mercy of Krishna. Mameva ye prapadyante mayam etang tarantite. The example may be given that when the sun is covered by clouds, no man-made apparatus can remove them from the sky. But the sun itself, which created the clouds, can immediately burn away the deadly covering and reveal itself. Can remove them from the sky, but the sun itself, which can immediately burn away the cloudy covering and reveal itself. Similarly, when we become covered by the illusory potency of the Lord, we identify with our temporary material body, and thus we are always in fear and anxiety. But when we surrender to the Lord himself, he can immediately free us from this illusion. The material world is padang yadvipadam. It is dangerous at every step. When a living entity understands that he is not the material body, but an eternal servant of God, his fear is vanquished. As stated by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Atra bhaktai sangsara bandhana bhetavyam sahi bhakto pravartamanasya svata evapayati. In this Bhagavat Dharma, devotees have no need to fear the bondage of material existence. That fear goes away of its own accord for one who engages in devotional service. It is important to make clear that bhayam, or fear, cannot ultimately be vanquished simply by impersonal self-realization, as expressed by the words Aham Brahmasmi, I am spirit soul. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Narad Muni says to Vyasadeva, Naishkamyam apyachuta bhava varjitang nashobhate. Mere Naishkamyam, or creation of material activities and repudiations of the bodily concept of life, cannot ultimately save one. The living entity must find a superior shelter on the spiritual shelter on the spiritual platform. Otherwise, he will come back to the fearful situation of material existence. That is stated in Shastra, Aruhya kritrena parang padang tatha patanti adho nadrita yushvadangayaha. Although one may with great labor and effort struggle up to the Brahman platform, klesho dikataraste sham avyakta sakta chetasam. If he does not find a suitable shelter, he will come back to the material platform. His so-called liberation is vimuktamana, liberation by imagination. The living entity is by nature pleasure-seeking, anandamai. Anandamai Prabhu is coming soon. Now we are suffering because we are falsely seeking pleasure on the material platform, and as a result we are becoming entangled in the painful complexities of material existence. But if we try to give up the pleasure-seeking propensity altogether, we shall eventually become frustrated and return to the platform of material pleasure-seeking. Although there is eternal existence on the Brahman platform of impersonal realization, there is no Ananda. Variety is the mother of enjoyment. In the Vaikuntha planets there is actual spiritual Ananda. Krishna is there in his ecstatic spiritual form, surrounded by his blissful associates. All of them eternally full of bliss and knowledge. They have nothing to do with material existence. In the spiritual planets, even the scenery and birds and animals are fully conscious of Krishna and are absorbed in transcendental bliss. Yadgatvana nivatante tadhama paramang mama. Bhagavad Gita from Bhagavad Gita. One who goes to the blissful spiritual planet of Krishna will be fully satisfied and never come back to the material planets. Thakur Vrindavan Chakravarti. Therefore, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has said, Kim Chitra Bhaktai Sansara Bandhana Bhetavyam. Only the bhaktas actually become free from fear. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has emphasized the necessity of accepting a bona fide spiritual master who is Rajendra Nandana Prishtha, the dearmost servitor of the son of Nanda Maharaj, Krishna. The bona fide spiritual master is completely free from envy of other living entities, and therefore he freely distributes knowledge of devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Devotional service to the Supreme Personality. When the living entities who are inimical to the service of the Lord somehow hear this knowledge submissively, they become free from the illusory potency of the Lord, which has covered them and thrown them into various miserable species of life. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, by the mercy of the spiritual master, the faithful disciple gradually realizes the transcendental position of Lord Narayana, who is served with great awe and reverence by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune. As the disciple's transcendental knowledge gradually increases, even the Paramaishvarya or supreme opulence of the Lord of Vaikuntha becomes pale in the light of the beauty of Govinda, Krishna. Govinda has inconceivable potency to enchant and give pleasure, and by the mercy of the spiritual master, the disciple gradually understands the blissful pastimes of Lakshmi and Narayana, Sri Sitaram, Rukmini, Dwarkadhish, and finally Lord Krishna himself, the purified living entity. Having understood the blissful pastimes, The disciple gradually develops his own blissful relationship, rasa, with Govinda. Having understood the blissful pastimes of Lakshmi Narayana, Sri Sita Ram, Rukmini Dwarkadish, and finally Lord Krishna himself, the purified living entity is given the unique privilege of participating directly in the devotional service of Krishna, who becomes his only object and shelter. This is an important verse. Of course, all the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam are important. But inasmuch as it is often quoted by Srila Prabhupada, we can understand it has some particularly some points that are particularly relevant for conditioned souls in the modern world. At least the first two lines are often quoted, the second two lines not much. Maybe because it's an important verse, has quite a long purport also. Of course, any verse you could, Ananta Shesh, he doesn't come to the end of discussing it even in millions of lifetimes. But there are many important verses, important points in this verse. The first word, bhayam, you can understand. This is the prominent characteristic of the material world. Now, it might seem to be largely absent in a fairly peaceful neighborhood like this. Just like these people are walking here. They don't expect us to jump up and club them on the head. Although, as I was discussing yesterday in London, it's quite possible you just walking along minding your own business and people can just come up and attack you. So you could say this is a peaceful place.
మీరు చెప్పొచ్చు ఇది ప్రశాంతమైన ప్రదేశమని.
Somewhat peaceful. Kuncham. Somewhat. I don't know. But there is fear here also. You can live a very peaceful life here. Of course, there's no guarantee you can lead a peaceful life, but people expect to do so. But eventually someone will come. Have you seen these, do they have them here, these big, long, for cutting grass? You have a long stick and then a very long blade at the end. I've seen that somewhere in Europe. It used to be common. So someone will come and cut you with that eventually. I'm talking about the grim reaper. I don't know how you can translate that. Grim means very severe. And reaper means someone who comes with this big device for cutting grass. You know what that is? Vidagdha Madhav Prabhu, the grim reaper. So that means it means death. The personality of death comes to cut you away from all that we think is very nice. So even if we're in a very nice and comfortable position, that actually creates more fear when death comes because we are afraid to leave that. Because we think that we're safe, we're more shocked when death comes. So, what is the cause of this condition? How can we overcome it? That should be our thought, how to overcome that. You can build big walls around your house to stop criminals coming inside. But there's no wall that will keep death outside. In Mahabharata it's described how Parikshit Maharaj, after being cursed to die after 7 days, he made a complete fort that no one could come inside. So because the Takshak was supposed to come and bite him, so he made some big arrangement that no one can come inside. So eventually some Brahmins came, so he let them in. And they brought some fruit for him. Inside the fruit was a worm which came out and became the Takshak and bit him. So that's, of course, we follow the Bhagavatam description of how he was free from fear. Parikshit was free from fear. What is that verse? Akuto bhayam, that Shukadev says, how to be free from fear. Tasmad bharata sarvatma bhagavan ishvaro hari. Smarta, what is it? Smarta vyaschet. No, it's another verse, but it's got the same purport. Smartavyas kirtitavyascha. What's the next word? Chechata bhayam. There's one word I'm missing. There's more than one verse, which is Shrotavya kirtitavyascha smartavyas chechata bhayam. And if one wants to be free from fear, then one has to Tasmat Bharata Saravatma. Saravatma, the Lord who is within everyone's heart. Bhagavan Ishvaro Hari. That doesn't need translation. You must hear about him, chant about him, and remember him. Then you can be free from fear. So Parikshit Maharaj adopted that course of action. And another version is given in the Mahabharata. So what will you do about that? Become confused. Sandigdha or vidagdha, similar words. So become doubtful. Sandigdha literally means to become doubtful, isn't it? Yeah. So Therefore we accept Srimad Bhagavatam Pramana Mamalam. It's the spotless evidence. So what Bhagavatam it says, we take that. So from the Mahabharata narration, we understand that however much one may try to protect oneself from death by material means, it is not possible. Oh, from the Mahabharata version. Mahabharata version, yeah. Whereas from the Srimad Bhagavat version, we understand that the only possible way to protect oneself from fear and from death is by taking shelter of Krishna. So it may be that both narrations are correct, that in one form Parikshit did one thing, in another form he did something else. That's also, all such things are quite possible, just to teach us. Because what is the cause of that fear? Ishada petasya viparyaya smritihi. Being inimical to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, forgetting Him. This is the cause of our being fearful in this material world. And thus we become absorbed in something else other than Krishna. That is termed here Dvitiya, second. Krishna is the one Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Dvitiya, that come in, that's the alternative. Just like in Hindi they say Dusara, which means like second, and it also means alternative, like that. So actually there's only Krishna. But if we don't want to remember Krishna, there's the alternative, which is the world of forgetting Krishna, which is a fearful situation. Therefore, one should worship Krishna if we're intelligent. We forget Krishna due to the influence of the material energy, which we accept. And here it's mentioned that we should worship Him with unalloyed devotion, this ekaya, and accept this Isham Guru Devatatma. Of course, this could be translated in different ways. It can mean to accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the Guru, a worshipable person, like this. Or as it's been translated here, one should worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead under the guidance of a Guru who one accepts as good as God. So this is why Bhagavatam is Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanam Amalam. It's the spotless, not only spotless evidence, but it's the Param Pramanam. It's the best evidence or guide for us in spiritual knowledge. Yeah, I'm just saying, it's a nice word. Parama Udkrishtamana. So, in one verse, it gives us the whole analysis of the problem and the solution. Of course, it's given in more detail elsewhere in Bhagavatam, which is another feature of the glory of Srimad Bhagavatam. In concisely and comprehensively, in both ways, it gives the exposition of the whole of reality. So, who chose this verse for speaking on? You chose it, yeah. So it's a very good verse. We should take shelter at the lotus feet of the fearless one. Abhay Charana Ravinda means Krishna, we can take shelter at his lotus feet and become completely fearless. Which of course also was the Diksha name, or the name that was given to Srila Prabhupada by his own Guru Devatatma. And that is that's the first symptom mentioned of a godly person by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Abhayam sattva sangshuddhya jnana yoga vyavastitihi. A godly person, the first symptom is fearlessness. Sattva sangshuddhihi, always, his whole existence is pure. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Or it can also mean that one acts always for the sake of purification. Jnana Yoga. One is situated in one's constitutional position in relationship with the Lord. One is in knowledge of that. Jnana Yoga Vyavastitihi. One understands one's actual position and is situated in that. So the symptom of that will be fearlessness. If one understands that I am not this body, I am an eternal servant of Krishna, there's nothing to fear for in this material world. Because one understands that there's nothing anyone can do to harm me. The only danger in this world is forgetfulness of Krishna. So devotees are fearless, but still they have one fear. There's a devotee should always be afraid of one thing. A devotee should always be afraid of Maya. As soon as we think, no, I don't have to be afraid of Maya. I'm self-realized. Maya cannot touch me. As soon as we think like that, as soon as Maya's already got us, if we even think like that, and it's only a matter of time before the gross manifestation of that is visible. So how can we be free from Maya? Abhajet tam, we should worship him, Krishna. Afraid of Maya is always attacking. We may sleep, Maya doesn't sleep. We may think, let me relax, I don't have to do bhakti so much. See, there's not so much Maya here. Think, I'll go to the village and there's not much Maya there, so I'll just relax. Already Maya's got us. So, if we want to fall down, Maya will arrange. She's very cooperative. We can fall down anywhere. If we want to be Krishna conscious, we can also be Krishna conscious anywhere. So Buddha is mentioned here. Buddha, the intelligent person. So taking this knowledge of Bhagavatam to become actually intelligent. Mostly people are not intelligent. I'm seeing here people are walking past. They take no interest. They just listen just for the 2 minutes it takes them to walk past here. Then their whole existence can be purified. But what do they think? Mostly they don't think. They think, it's different groups have their different satsangs, so it's just another one. It's not mine. I'm part of the Gayatri Parivar or Sai Mandal or something like that. It's not for me. It's for them. It's all right. Let them do it. Very nice. What to do to wake up these sleeping souls? Go door to door. Distribute Prabhupada's books best. At some point in time, people should wake up by reading these books. That Maya arranges for... There are cycles of time in which people feel... Like a whole nation may feel euphoric. That means blissed out. Just like in America after the Second World War, in the 1950s, everything's wonderful. We're on top of the world, the most powerful nation. We're inventing all these different things, and people have cars, and everyone's leading a very nice life. How wonderful everything is. And then by the 1960s, there was, of course, in the 50s they had the Korean War also, but in the 60s there was the Vietnam War, and then there's civil unrest and student rioting, and the American dream was turning into a nightmare. By the 80s and 90s, people had become again optimistic. Let's develop the economy and make Star Wars so that this space technology so that we can control the military situation. Now they're down. There was a cartoon I saw in that book which Sahadev Prabhu brought. So it showed like one of these graphs where goes up and down like this. So it was going down like this. It went off the line went right off the graph. So the man followed the line and it went into the next room. Then it went into the next room, and then it went into the toilet and down the toilet. So we're flush. Our whole situation is so bad. It's a great time for preaching when people feel hopeless. When they're feeling hopeful of material success, then what will they listen? If we say this material world's miserable, say, well, it's not miserable, come on. I've got a car and a girl, and beautiful wife and 2-3 girlfriends on the side and a boyfriend also, and I get fed up with the girls because, that's the way we go these days, and everything's wonderful. But the force of time is such that there's like that cycle. Sometimes Kabu Raja, Kabu Praja, Kabu Vipra Shudra, Kabu Sharge, Kabu Narak. I just can't remember. Slept late last night. Kabu Sharge, Kabu Mate, Narakeba, Kabu Dev, Kabu Daita, Kabu Das Prabhu. Sometimes we're in heaven, sometimes we're in the earthly planet, sometimes we're in hell. Kabu Svarge, Kabu Marte, Narakeba, Kabu. They can understand. You can understand, right? Kabu Dev, Kabu means, how do you say, means sometimes. Kabu Dev, Kabu Daitya, Kabu Das Prabhu. So this is the material situation. So now the world is moving more and more towards a fearful situation. And that's what we read, of course, in the newspapers. But that's because the newspapers are dominated by the West. In China, they're thinking, great, now we're going up ahead. And in India also, there's this feeling, now we're developing the nation and we're going to become a superpower and all this kind of thing. But people are not satisfied. Can only be satisfied in Krishna consciousness. So let's preach Krishna consciousness. And actually, by distributing these books, if people just read them, it destroys their illusion, and they can't be happy in the material world. Birth, death, old age, and disease, and they start, oh no, it's true. So distributing these books it's changing people's perspective so that they can see not dvitiyam, but ekam, the first position, the actual position, Krishna and Krishna consciousness. So to all you people who are living very comfortably in your houses, you're all going to die soon. I'm not cursing you, it's just a fact, that's all. So think about it. What's going to happen after death? You should think about it. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So we are told. Actually, I think in quantum, that won't go. But anyway. Yeah. In quantum, that won't go. But anyway. For all those nice family meals you have with chicken and all this, you're going to end up in one of the Venkateshwar hatcheries. You're going to be part of a great Indian multinational corporation based in India. See, in my next life, I'm going to work for Venkateshwar hatcheries. It's already decided as a chicken. So don't become a victim of Maya. Although it's a very fearful situation. Chickens are always in fear, isn't it? Even if there's nothing to fear, they're always fearful. It's a very horrible situation. Prabhupada also in France, he was met by he was given a nice reception by the mayor of Paris, which is like the biggest politician in Paris. So Prabhupada said, yes, you have a very great country, and if you perform sinful activities like maintaining slaughterhouses, you can come back in this country and be killed also. He said it right to all the big dignitaries of the city. So it's an unfortunate fact that people are living their life in such a way that they create a situation which is a nightmare for themselves. But it's not a nightmare, it's the reality. So what to do? We should take these books door to door, Harinam, let people at least have the opportunity to get free from this horrible situation. Vidagdha Madhava Prabhu is specializing in the young generation, preaching to the young generation. How young?
5 to 7.
How young? 5 to 7 years old. He has his books. Who am I? Show that. You can show it to everyone. Yeah, that's good. So there's no... Actually at that young age is the best time. That's why we're having this Gurukul. Instead of going to the regular school and becoming just a normal demon like everyone, then let them go and become pure devotees from the very beginning. I was just reading that yesterday. Prabhupada said for the children, it all depends on association. Whatever association they get, they'll come out like that. So if you send them to a school that teaches them that to earn lots of money and enjoy the senses is the goal of life, then they'll become demons. And if you send them to a school where from the beginning they learn that we are simply meant for loving Krishna, then they'll love Krishna. Okay, Hare Krishna. I guess you're all a little hungry, huh? Because there was no prasadam last night. So, unless some of you they cooked after 11 o'clock, I don't think anyone did that, huh? No. They kept from previously and they took late. Anyway, Hare Krishna. Any questions? Ask them later. You can ask, because... Yeah.
You mentioned the 2 stories about Maharaj Purita.
Yeah.
And, of course, we accept the Bhagavatam, the Spanish Purana version. But it is interesting. It's by the same author, Vikasa. And the Mahabharata is sometimes called the 5th Veda.
Yeah.
So we encourage people to also read the Mahabharata, for the sage. So how do we reconcile the 2 versions?
How do we reconcile the 2 versions of the stories? Well, I gave one suggestion. That Parikshit could have taken 2 forms. One the spiritual Parikshit and one the materialistic Maya-influenced form. You find about Shuka that he left home, he didn't come back, he thought everything was Maya, but there's also the Shukadev who married and had children, the son of Vyas. So it seems he expanded himself into 2 forms also. That's one explanation. Another explanation is that Mahabharata, 5th Veda, yes, but it's particularly for Stri, Shudra, Dvija, Bandhu, Nam, Trayana, Veda, Gochara. It's for the less intelligent class who are not fit for studying the Vedas. Kalpa Bhed. Yeah, that's another common explanation when there are differing versions, that it could be in a different kalpa.
Kalpaveda ante adi veroka kalpamlo kuda,
or it may be just an illusory story inserted for bewildering people by Vyas. It could be an interpolation. Prakshipta. The word is prakshipta in Sanskrit. Interpolation, where someone else comes along afterward and changes it. Madhva, who gives so much importance to the Mahabharata, says that the Mahabharata is ati prakshipta. It's highly interpolated. So if you see, by now you open up more confusion. So therefore, it's good to hear from, as we heard here, this Guru Devatatma. If you try to understand everything, you'll go crazy, that's all. You won't learn anything, if you try to look at everything from every single possible angle of vision, you won't learn anything. So better to just take from a guru. It doesn't mean you become blind or stupid or dull-headed, but realizing our inability to know everything and understand everything, take the essence. If we study Shastra with a questioning mind, we can there are hundreds of things that we could, things that we don't fully understand or possible doubts and things like this. But we shouldn't think that therefore something's wrong with Shastra, but we understand we have limits to how much we can know and understand. And sometimes there are points which even great acharyas, they can't understand. And then Krishna will reveal to them in point of time. I mean, we have the story of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur reading in Chaitanya Charitamrita about the verse with 24.5 syllables, and how could it be half syllable, and he couldn't understand it, and he was ready to commit suicide and all this, and then Radharani revealed to him that in some ancient grammar book there's said that such and such can be considered a half syllable, and then everything was... So, there's a very interesting article which appeared in Back to Godhead some years ago from our very analytical, maybe over-analytical godbrother, Kundali Prabhu.
పూర్తిగా ఎక్కువగా అతిగా విశ్లేషించే ఒక
అతి విశ్లేషించే
ఒక భక్తుడు మా
over-analytical, which is called The Quest for Certainty. And it's in that article he describes how in the Western world, with the advent of modern science, there's this idea that you should always be able to understand everything fully and certainly and have strict rules about everything so that everything's completely understood. Whereas in Indian culture, that's not. It's a great culture of knowledge, both material and spiritual. But the idea that we can understand that everything can be reduced to mathematical laws or psychological laws, it's known that there's always the achintya factor, or the inconceivable factor. It's always there. So actually there's a book being recently written, which I haven't read, by Rajiv Malhotra called, I wrote a review for the book, I just read a little bit, Being Different. Yeah, it's called Being Different. And in which his thesis is that, in the West they want to have everything like, bottled, sealed, fully understood. But in the dharmic world, that means what we would call Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, Buddhism, and all this. Contradictions don't throw you out completely, and it's accepted that there are contradictions, and that's all within the scheme of reality. That contradictions will always be there. Just like, to give an example, within Gauriya Vaishnavism, we are preaching everywhere Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mataf parataram nanyat kinchidasti. There's no one or anything which is equal to or greater than Krishna. This is the ultimate fact, the ultimate reality that everyone should understand. And if anyone doesn't accept this, they're a demon. And then when you fully accepted that and understood it, then you go to Vrindavan, and then you find out that Radharani's in charge and not Krishna at all. So, what are you going to do? Contradiction. Are we cheating people by telling them that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Both facts are true. Krishna is the Supreme, there's no one above Krishna, and Krishna is fully subordinate to Radha also. Of course, not everyone in Vrindavan accepts that. The controversy goes right up to Vrindavan. There's Krishna's party and there's the Radharani's party, and they're always fighting with each other. And that is resolved as Ananda Chinmaya Rasa, spiritual transcendental bliss. It doesn't really matter who's supreme. Well, they have very serious fights about that, like capturing each other, tying each other up, and throwing yogurt on each other, and very serious fights about this, who's supreme. But at that level, it doesn't matter. The philosophy isn't the issue. It's just, where's the fun? That's all. So, yes, looking at the watch, fire is burning. There's a fire burning. Go and put it out. Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Dehamashita Pranapana Samayuktaf Pachamyanam Chaturvidham. It's that fire. Okay. So, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.